Lane, Jenny, what do you think?
Yep,
Do
I'd say
it.
go for it.
All right, let's go. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Nicole Bowles. I am an MDes graphic design candidate from the class of 2022.
And I'm Lane Tui Bloodworth. I'm also an MDes graphic design candidate for the class of 2022.
And I'm Jenny Cyrus, and same as both of them, graphic design and 2022.
Yeah, so welcome everyone to the first design talk in the UIC School of Design public seminar series for 2021. We are extremely excited to have Chang here with us tonight, and very excited to see that there's quite a few of you joining us, not only here on Zoom, but also on YouTube. Before we introduce T, we'd like to give a little information about the format of the talk. Constituents in the School of Design are here with us on a Zoom call. Like I said, we're also on the YouTube channel live. And so both of these platforms are actually allowing us an opportunity to invite the public in as well, to hear these designers speak this year throughout our entire series, giving us the option to solicit comments and questions from the viewers here and in YouTube. So we'll be monitoring those chats.
Yeah, so T will be speaking with us very shortly, and then we'll open the floor to questions. We ask that you hold your questions until that time, though, just to limit any confusion in the chat. It will still be turned on for the host, so you can message us if you have any. We have a few of us here acting as moderators to gather questions from both platforms, so we'll do our best to facilitate the Q&A portion and make sure everyone gets theirs in.
And for a little information on this year's seminar series, it's entitled Flour, Salt, and Water. It started with our MDes cohort grappling with the shift in social norms due to the global pandemic. And bread making became a unique cultural signifier of life in quarantine and an analogy for structures of consumption. How do we produce? What do we consume? How has the pandemic impacted this? We hoped to discuss this idea of sustenance and how, from the perspective of designers. We wanted to gain a greater understanding of the structures that influence our daily life while positioning design as a catalyst for change. And we've invited designers that we believe are involved in similar investigations.
Okay, and we wanted to remind everyone that following our talk tonight, we also have 3 more scheduled talks in the seminar series this year. Peter Block will be joining us on April 15th at noon, Chicago time. Then we also have this fall, One of My Kind, a collaborative design production or publication practice, and Annie Liu.
And you can find information and links to those talks on our seminar series webpage at seminarseries.design.uic.edu. And we'll post that link in the chat of YouTube and Zoom so you can all have that handy.
And again, we're so thrilled to have Chang here as the first speaker for the 2021 series. Chang is an industrial designer, entrepreneur, activist living and working in San Francisco. She's the co-founder and VP of design of CRAVE, a San Francisco-based company specializing in pleasure products that look as good as they feel. 2 of T's notable accomplishments include creating the world's first crowdfunded sex toy and mainstreaming the category of sex jewelry. Prior to CRAVE, T created her first company, Incognito, and served as the first female industrial designer at both Trek Bicycle and Goody Products. T was named inventor on multiple patents, including the Ouchless hairbrush collection that I'm sure many of you have seen and used yourself. In addition to her professional work, T is an active member of the Women in Design section of Industrial Designers Society of America, San Francisco Design Week, Reimagine, and CRAVE Foundation for Women.
Okay, so thank you, T, for being here. And before I hand it over to you, we had a question that we wanted to ask just to start things off. So as we surpass the year mark in the pandemic, how have you changed, if any, in this past year? And how have you grown as a designer?
That's a great question. I love how that ties into the flour, water, the theme of the the series. Yeah, this year made me realize that I really cannot take time for granted. I think prior to the pandemic, it was easy to be like, oh, I can plan that next month. I can like go do this, you know, and like there's a later. And this pandemic for me, and I think it showed a lot of people that we're not really guaranteed a later. Because, you know, I think, you know, since like the 1980s, we have had just decades and decades and decades of economic and technological growth. Yes, we had that little dip in 2008, but overall we can count on, you know, things getting better and counting on a higher salary or et cetera, et cetera. But now this year in particular, I wasn't, you know, able to plan what I, you know, even for like our social media, what do we do next week? You know, who knows? Like, it's not something that I take very lightly. And so it made me, I think, more introspective in what was important to me and how I was going to allocate my time and how did I want to show up in the world as a designer and as a human being. And made me evaluate a lot of different things, such as like my social media, like, is that really important? You know, what is it for? And so I think it just made me more selective and more focused on what is really most meaningful to me, and kind of filter out a lot of the nonsense that, you know, sometimes we just don't see. It's like going back to the basics. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, T. I know that we've all definitely had a rethinking of our relationship with social media in the past year. So we'd love to turn it over to you. I know that you have already shared the screen for your presentation, and we're excited to hearing more.
Okay, cool. All right. So you guys can see my screen. Everything's good. All right. All right. So before I begin, I just want to be clear that I design sex toys, specifically vibrators for women. And so there will be vibrators in this presentation. And so if you are offended by these products, you have been advised. So, okay, you are probably wondering, what in the world does a sex toy designer have to do with activism? Unfortunately, a lot. And I really wish it wasn't so radical, but yet it is. So I'm going to explain why, okay? And I'm going to start with the beginning. If the slide wants to change. Okay, great. All right. So my family immigrated to the States from Taiwan when I was 6 years old. So English is not my first language, and we are very much a typical conservative Asian family, which means that we didn't talk about sex more than any other family, which probably is like never, okay? And so with that, my parents, I will share that they came from, maybe because they were both scientists, they both have a master's degree in the sciences as like microbiology and botany, horticulture. I think because of that lens, and they're also not religious, by the way they approached sex was very pragmatic, which means that they never condemned it. So I didn't grow up thinking like, oh, sex was gross and nasty. They very much treat it as a matter of factly and just a part of life. Okay. So now that said, I can confirm that me building a sex toy company was definitely not their first choice of me bringing honor to my family. So yeah, but my other brothers and sisters, they all have very respectable jobs. I'm just kidding. They're all very proud of me, but yeah, they would have rather me to do something else, you know, but anyway, but they're very proud of me now. Here. So growing up, you know, there's a stereotype that Asian people, we have, you know, businesses like a Chinese restaurant or a laundromat or whatever. And my parents were no exception. We actually owned a furniture store, because when you're an immigrant to a new country and your English is not that good, your degree, even if it's a master's advanced degree, it can only take you so far. So both my parents decided to, you know, start a furniture business. And this is the flea market where I worked, the Beaufort Howie Flea Market, from the age of 12 to 18. Okay. Now we didn't live in this area. And I bring this up is that because I worked at my parents' store from 12 to 18 years old in an area that's very much lower income. I mean, I'm talking real gang shootouts. Like if I had to flip the table to shield me and my sister from like spray bullets. I mean, it was definitely a really, really rough part of town. But I bring this up in that having experienced this, it opened up my eyes to inequities in the world. Because during the day, Monday through Friday, I would be in the suburbs with my family going to school, and working here on the weekends took me way out of that suburban bubble. And it helped me realize that no matter what income level or ethnic background, you have, we all very much have the same hopes and dreams. Okay. And it also made me realize that I really didn't want to sell furniture for the rest of my life, and that I better get a college degree. And so that's what I did. I went to Georgia Tech for my undergraduate in industrial design, and I got my master's at the Royal College of Art in London in design products. And I worked on a lot of consumer products from, you mentioned hairbrushes to bicycles to furniture. And I want to share with you the moment that I fell in love with industrial design. So if you look at the hairbrushes, as you brought that up earlier, I worked on this was actually my first job out of college. I worked on this hairbrush for about a year and a half. And afterwards, one day we received a letter from the marketing department. A mom had written in saying that every morning brushing her 5-year-old daughter's hair was always a battle. But using the hairbrush, she fussed way less, and that she was able to have a little bit easier of a morning. And that was the moment I realized that what I do can impact people's daily lives. And that was really powerful. And that for me was it, okay, that's it. This is what I want to do. So I continued being an industrial designer. But one of the things I noticed, and you guys mentioned in the intro, is that I found myself always like the only female on the team, if not the first female industrial designer hired, the only woman on the manufacturing floor. And I soon learned that my industry, industrial design. How many of you are industrial designers here? Can I just raise a hand, or like industrial designers, or are you mainly all graphic designers? All okay. All right, there's a few. All right, here we go. Okay, all right, a few. All right, cool, awesome. Okay, so I just want to know where my people at. Like just a few, but still, graphic designers are also my people too. Because I actually, when I went to Georgia Tech, I got my even though my degree was in industrial design, I got a certificate because I had extra credits from whatever scholarship I had. And I used it to learn graphic design. So graphics design has a really special place in my heart, because I honestly believe I'm a better industrial designer and I'm a more successful designer because of my graphic design skills. So just FYI. So if you're an industrial designer, learn some graphic design. Okay. All right. So sorry, I digress. Okay. All right. So I learned that my industry was heavily male dominated. I mean, to the point that when I was hired as the first female industrial designer at Track, I remember the first day, a few hours into orientation, I had to use the restroom. And that's when we all realized there was no women's restroom. And this is like way before the whole gender neutral thing. Like, no, they weren't that advanced. They just literally never had a female to stay in the design studio long enough that needed to use the restroom. So they never occurred to them that they needed a bathroom for women. So anyway, this is just a story to illustrate how not diverse the industry was. And then very recently, oops. All right, why you do that? Hold on. Okay, good. All right. Here we go. All right. Then recently I came across this statistic. Some of you may have seen, this went viral a little bit. These are stats from Core Float, Core 77, when they did a salary survey, as well as the Design Council UK that came out in 2018. And this is really related to product industrial designers. So this is how dominated my industry is. If you're in the UK, it's 95% male. If you're in the US, it's 81%. Okay. This is really a shock, but not that big of a shock, because as women, this is very much my lived experience, because I've never actually worked with another female industrial designer. And the women that I've spoken to, many of them who, are my age, around 40s, they also, many of them have also not worked with industrial design, or very few have they had the opportunity to work with other female industrial designers. So for us, our lived experience, this totally checks out. And I think our industry never really realized this was a problem, because when I graduated in industrial design in 2002, my class was 50-50. Like, there wasn't like, oh, there's only like 5 women out of a class of like 80, it was very much 50-50. And when I talked to other women, it was the same way. And so in academia, there's this false sense that, oh, everything's fine. And we thought everything was fine until once I graduated. I didn't realize at the time, but now looking back, I was like one of handful of women that actually got jobs in design. Everyone else kind of, went on to something else. So anyway, there's a huge diversity problem, gender disparity in industrial design. Now, you may be wondering, like, what's the big deal? Like, so what? Well, when you have 50% of the population not represented at the table when things are being created for them, those products suffer. And in real extreme cases, women die. So these are just a few out of so many examples that I can give you. So like, for example, breast pumps, okay? We have been breastfeeding since the beginning of mankind, all right? But it is only in the last like 5 years that I have seen smart breast pumps that allow women to be able to pump milk and do other things without having to sit there like literally a cow, milking, and it's just so dehumanizing. Ask any mother. Okay. So I won't go into that, but that's an example, but that has been around for so long because it's been a lot of, oftentimes men designing these products, asking maybe some women, but they didn't have any female stakeholders at the table really making and driving those decision making. Okay. Seatbelts. This is one area that it's pretty much criminal, okay, that I cannot fathom how this is still the case, but the seatbelt wasn't made for bodies with breasts. Have you ever noticed how like maybe like your girlfriend or like you or like your friend, like when they're wearing a seatbelt, they're just always like kind of fidgety, it's cutting across their chest and then like they're pulling it over and they're like wearing, because it just wasn't designed for bodies that have boobs. And to make things worse, we actually don't even have seatbelts that properly fit pregnant women. Car crashes is the #1 cause of fetal death relating to maternal trauma. So like, this is just one of those things that we have as an industry embrace the archetypal male body as the human body without thinking that there's a male body and a female body. And therefore, when they're designing these products that are supposedly for both genders, one gender suffer. There are real statistics about women are 41% more likely to suffer serious injuries during car crashes because the seatbelts weren't designed for them. Okay. So that's that. All right. Next. All right. This is a little more, this is not as dire. However, it's still a big deal because voice recognition is becoming very much part of our daily lives when we use Alexa, Siri, even voice activated, in our cars. But this is a problem. How many of you women like use voice recognition? Just curious. Anybody use voice recognition? A few of you? Okay. And if you ever thought that, why is this thing not listening to me? Or like it's having trouble understanding you? That's very likely the case because a lot of these voice recognition software have been trained on predominantly male voices. This is a problem that the auto industry have documented since 2017. Okay. And so, these are things that's just really annoying. And in fact, when this was brought up to somebody, I can't remember what company, because I don't also want to get sued, his response to why this doesn't work as well for women, he was like, well, we just need to train women to speak lower. And you're just like, for fuck's sake, like, this is one of those things that is just incredible. It's just incredible. So this is the reason why it's important to have diversity, because when you only have one type of designer at the table, the view, is going to be very homogenous. And the more diversity you have at the table, you can look at a problem from multiple points of views and you can better solve for that problem, versus only having men, and they're only bringing their lived experiences, which rightfully so. Okay. But that means that they don't know what they don't know. So that is one of many reasons why gender disparity and diversity is hugely important. So sex toys is another victim of the lack of diversity. And I think this meme kind of sums up why, it's a problem. I could not understand why products, the vast majority of vibrators for women, were all so phallic and penetration focused, when in fact, less than 18% of women can orgasm via penetration alone. So why aren't there better clitoral vibes? Why is everything so, well, because it's an industry run by men, created by men, at women, marketed towards women, of what they think women want. Of course, they think women want their D, but it's like, yo, buddy, no, you literally missed the spot. It's like, it's in the clit. That's where it's at. And I can't really even blame people, because we didn't even fully document the full anatomy of the clitoris until 1998, when Dr. Helen O'Connell, who actually did MRI on living. I'm not saying that she discovered the clitoris. I'm saying the whole full structure of the clitoris wasn't fully documented, and the size, anyway, until 1998. So this gives you the context of how much we're in the dark when it comes to women's needs, products for women, and looking at things from a more, male, one-sided point of view. So, yeah. And I also couldn't understand why do they have to be so ridiculous, like rabbits and, poorly made, like these toxic materials. It was just so embarrassing. And because that was all that was available, I feel like women, we've just had to make do with what was available. You accepted that shame and embarrassment was part of that experience, when it absolutely doesn't have to be. Yeah. I decided I wanted to do something about this in 2008. So I wanted to change that conversation around female pleasure, and also change the way people thought about sex toys, because ultimately that will change the way a woman feels about her own pleasure and her own sexuality. Just imagine, if, let's say, you like swimming, and every time you needed to buy a swimsuit, you had to go to some really seedy shop on the corner of downtown with some weird dude at the counter doing who knows what. I mean, that would make you feel like maybe swimming is not such a good thing. I shouldn't be doing this. But pleasure is part of our existence as human beings. It's one of the ways we celebrate and honor our bodies, and there's no reason why products for this experience had to be so embarrassing and shameful. So I was like, okay, this is bullshit. We got to do something about this. So in 2010, I became co-founder of CRAVE, and basically I've been the industrial designer and leading their product vision for their entire line of products. The company that you mentioned before, Incognito, was a product that it was a company I bootstrapped in 2008. And then I subsequently sold that to CRAVE so that I joined them as a co-founder. And these are just a few of, the products in the line. And true to the brand, we very much embrace the user experience, which means that we talk to women. Half of our company is women. We have men here too. We have a balance of points of views. I'm not saying only women can design for women. That's not what I'm saying. And well, here it is. And who knew women wanted non-embarrassing, compact, discreet, quiet, high quality products. Like, who knew? I mean, honestly, I think most women knew, but we were never at the table to be able to, influence any of the real decision making. So yeah, that is sort of give you a sense of the line. And I think the product we are best known for is the Vesper vibrator necklace on the upper left side. Because in addition to making this product just, discreet and palatable, like, not embarrassing, we took it another level. Like, I wanted these products to be so beautiful that you didn't think of them as sex toys. I wanted this to elevate not only that experience, but also change how people thought about the category, because these experiences can be beautiful. I mean, there's no reason why they had to be any less design than anything else you own, in 2020, 2021. So yeah, that is like the products that we are probably best known for. And as a result, that product really took off, and we were credited with mainstreaming the category of sex jewelry. And to be perfectly honest, we really didn't know if people would wear it, because this is not a product that we did consumer research asking like, hey, would you wear a vibrator under your neck? They'd be like, fuck no. Like, why would it? No, like, no, but where the idea came from, and this is something that I really want you to understand, is that this has to do with listening. And it's listening to what people want and connecting to that emotion. One of the things I learned in my years of designing these products is that people really wanted to have a better conversation around sex and sexuality and pleasure, but they were not able to. It was, the products are hideous. The shopping experience is really like cringy, like all of that. Like, that doesn't make it easy for people to be able to talk about pleasure and products. Imagine bringing, and also like, if you have a partner and if you, are open to having sex toys as part of your experience, it's very hard for like a woman to bring in like a big old dildo and be like, hey, I thought, we could like have, it's not, it's a little awkward, yeah, men can get embarrassed and like think, but like overall, like, it's just not the same way when you present her with a beautiful vibrator necklace that's like chic in a box, and it just takes it up that notch, So, so as a result, I think because of our listening to what people wanted emotionally, I think that is really important. It's not just the functionality of the product, but also doing that listening of what people want emotionally wanted to have an easier way to talk about sex and have open conversations, but it was just not easy to get there. And so by having this product as a necklace that you can wear out, it created conversations wherever people went. And people wore them all over the place. Women would bring this into their brunches with their girlfriends, and then suddenly they'll have a conversation. Women wear this to bars, and like, all of that. It just created conversations wherever it went, and they felt good, and they felt empowered about their sexuality. And I think the best way, like, you don't have to take it from me because obviously I'm biased, but here are some things that people have said. Symbol of independence and self-care. Not only is the Vesper a beautiful accessory, it's also a symbol of independence and self-care. Unlike other self-care products, I will never feel the need to stash my Vesper in a sock drawer. One of the things that I think maybe people don't realize when you use traditional sex toys is that stashing and hiding of your products is intrinsically part of that experience. And I just didn't understand why that had to be. And another review, sexual empowerment around my neck. I love the Vesper. Energetically, I can feel myself instantly connect with my sensual and sexual self as I wear it around my neck. So yeah, this definitely was really amazing. That was a product that was not only, I think, successful commercially, but also conceptually. I think that is probably like the best thing I think a designer could ask for is that you have a product that resonates with people, with the culture, and also it sells well. You know, I like, there's so many times products don't have all of those ingredients. It's like, oh, this is really cool. It's in Surface magazine, but there's only like 5 of them and they cost $15,000. And, you know, it's a very different kind of accessibility and the influence that you have over, you know, people versus when something is actually accessible to everybody at a price point and people talk about it. And this year we are now available at Nordstrom. And I think because of products that we're putting out, we're helping to support that better and more modern conversation around sex and pleasure. Okay, oops, I'm sorry. I keep trying to go to the next. Why is it not going to the next slide? Okay, all right. Yay, okay. So, you know, our products help people to feel better about and more empowered about their pleasures, just like the hairbrush. It can make a difference in people's lives. And so even though these are products, you know, in graphic design, it's the same way, you know, how you communicate. So whatever you do, I think it's very obvious that to design is to influence people. And one of my personal heroes is Mike Monteiro. He wrote an amazing book called Ruined by Design. I really, really, really recommend you guys all checking this out because he is a UX designer. And his wife is an industrial designer. And the things that he talks about is really pretty much universal in the practice of design, to be perfectly honest. And he said, to design is to influence people. And we need to care about the effects of our work more than the cleverness of our idea because of how we can impact people. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And, you know, for me personally, this is my own method. This is what resonates with me is that because of the impact I can have, I design very much with an activist mindset. And to me, that means to intentionally use my skill set to create positive social impact, and particularly for people who are marginalized and underrepresented, you know, such as women. Now, okay, how many of you, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you feel like the world is wonderful? Like there's nothing we need to do. We're cool. We're just cruising along. No, nobody, not a single person. Okay. How many of you are doing what you're doing because you want to have impact on people's lives? How many of you are designing with that idea in mind? Raise your hand. Just want to see. Okay. All right. Very cool. So I got news for you. You guys actually might be an activist. Now, don't be afraid. Like, seriously, don't be afraid. Because activism really comes in many different forms. And this is Paola Antonelli. She is a senior curator at MoMA. And she said, you can be a designer and an activist. And you can be a curator and you can be an activist. Activism can be very quiet or very loud. Anyone can be an activist. There are so many different ways, okay? And I think in many of our minds, we think activism as like chaining yourself up to a fence or boycotting or doing something extreme or picketing, which all of those are many methods, you know, ways that you can, but you can also be a curator, you can be a designer and be an activist, because the full intention behind that is to be able to have some kind of social impact on people's lives. And particularly when it comes to graphic design, if you look up design activism, you will find a lot of graphic design material. I think that is one of the earliest forms of activism, because graphic design is so crucial in creating something that people can rally around. If you look up the history of like Black Panther and some of the information around that and the flyers and the visuals that were created to rally people around that idea, that is an example of activism, okay? So why is this so hard? Okay, so now if you want to influence people and impact humanity with your skill set, this is the playbook that I've put together. From my 18 years of experience of designing products and getting it out into market and hoping, and impacting people's lives, these are the things I want you to think about. So these are very, very simple things, 5 simple things. I'm not going to go into each of them equally, okay, because many of them I think you already know, but this is a playbook for anyone who want their work to be impactful and influence a lot of people, okay? So this is my playbook for design activism, all right? So the first one is purposeful. Purposeful, basically, what is the big idea? Big idea as in like, not like, oh, this Bluetooth thing. And no, it's like, we're talking about overall arching human needs. So in my case, I'm going to refer a lot of these examples back to CRAVE is because this is where I have proof point and, like this is why I'm standing here telling you these things, is that you have to think about what is that overarching need that people want. If you're designing clothes, warmth, okay? Sex toys, it's pleasure, okay? So identify that big high level thing that all human beings can connect with, okay, and is a need. The next, user-centric. I don't want to see any more like focus groups of men taking classes or guessing what women or marginalized people want, studying what they want, because they're not extinct. They're in the workplace. Just hire them. Like so many companies, they pay lip service to like, oh yeah, we tested on users and whatnot. And they really don't. And they still have, their core team is just full of men making these decisions. And that is really disingenuous. And you're not going to see what you don't see. Like you just don't know what you don't know, basically. And so that's why it's so important to have diversity and really embrace the user, ask the user, does your team reflect the users that you're designing for? That is huge. Okay. Seduction. Okay. So this is where I'm going to go in more depth. Now I want you to think about being seductive, not in that romantic context. Okay. Seduction is really a way to charm someone to accept and understand your idea. If that makes sense. Your parents do it. Your professors do it. They want to teach you something. They want you to absorb an idea. And so they have to present it to you in a way that you can understand and accept. I mean, that's simply what seduction is. And so when it comes to products, there's a formula. I'm sure you've heard form follows function, but you have to add one more, which is emotion. Okay. There are a lot of things that form-wise, it functions, it's fine, but it just doesn't get you. It just doesn't have that extra oomph of connecting with you that makes you feel like, this makes me feel so good, or like I love using this. This is what I'm all about, and that ingredient is emotion. And I think we so often design emotion out of our products, and we only talk about products as far as like the functionality, the requirements and features and benefits, but you really have to also think about the emotional aspect of the product, because people are not going to say, make me a vibrator necklace. Like no one has ever said that. But I think as a designer, you can intuit what the emotional needs of the users are and bring that into a form and a function that really changes the paradigm. So yeah, and even if you're designing a toilet for a third world country, for example, you still need to imbue that with emotion, because people can see and they can feel when something is designed for them, and they can intuit that quality and that care that's gone into the design. So yeah, that the form and also the visual, the marketing and all of that, all is part of that whole seduction. I mean, no one knows seduction better than advertising or religion, to be perfectly honest. But all right, that's like a different talk. Yeah. So let's see. So this is a big deal. So, and also like as humans, we're very superficial. We're very superficial. If something doesn't grab us visually, grab us emotionally, we tend to tune it out. So if you want to influence people, you have to seduce them with your product and your idea. And the way you present it matter a lot. And that's why I say industrial designers, it'd be really good for you to get some background in graphic design, because I think I learned graphic design and it really helped me as a designer because I was able to present myself digitally when I can't be there to speak for myself. And by knowing basic fundamentals of typography and layout and all that stuff really is, I think, the difference when you are applying with a resume or portfolio. So anyway, so yeah, that whole thing is part of seduction because you're seducing people visually, okay? The next thing is scalable. Well, if you want to have impact, you have to reach people and you have to think about how you're going to reach them. Like where will your products be sold? Being sold at a small CD shop somewhere is not going to have much impact. Whereas if you get into Nordstrom or Bergdorf Goodman, I mean, bless their soul, they're no longer anymore. They're only online now. But, getting to mainstream places really, really count. And for industrially designed, mass-produced products, getting a manufacturer is just one aspect of it. You may decide you want to do something that is just for a museum, which is totally fine, but just know that your reach is going to be people who have access to that museum, So think about where can people access it? Who can access it? What price point? So these are all the things, okay? And this is the other one that I really, really want to emphasize on, because when it comes to impact, it's very much about engagement. Our product, the Vesper necklace, engaged people. People went out and they wanted to engage with other people with this product. So that's from the product side, but also from the other side is that we live in a stigmatized culture when it comes to these products. So as a company, I can't, like Casper, put up an ad on Instagram and just sponsor a post or boost a post. All of that is off limits to us as a company, okay? Which is really, is really difficult because advertising on social media has become the way of advertising. People aren't putting it on billboards, or on radio or on TV. It's social media. So anyhow, we had to kind of be smarter. We had to really think outside of how can we reach people other than social media. So one of our crazy ideas, and this happened in 2018, is that we bought an Airstream, which is the trailer that you see at the bottom. And we basically ripped it out and gutted it and turned it into a vibrator factory. So it was a pop-up shop. There was an area where people can build their own vibrators. And we had these protest signs that had these sassy sayings, and people were taking photos of it. And I drove it across the country from San Francisco to Palm Springs to Portland to Coachella to Chicago and New York and back, going to mainstream music festivals, design festivals, mainstream events. And that got people really engaged because they have an idea of what, how they think sex toys are sold. And then suddenly they're presented with this really beautiful, open and approachable, friendly Airstream that's just really open. They come in and they realize they don't have to whisper about sex. They don't have to whisper anymore. They're like, oh my God, these are sex toys? Holy shit, let me take two. That was the kind of reaction we got. People could not believe how beautiful these vibrators could be. And it was a space they feel comfortable in. And so that made that whole engagement, they told people about it. And so that is kind of one way of approaching engagement. Yeah, and it was a fun experience and they can build the vibrator. So all these things. But also want to point out engagement comes in many different ways also. And these are some other areas I want to kind of touch on as you think about the kind of company or the kind of product that you're trying to create to have social impact. So obviously, first one, product, it has to be compelling, it has to be loved, okay? Experience, all the different touch points of your brand really needs to be there. Like if people reach out to you on social media, if they have a problem with a product, like what is that touch point? It has, all of that has to be really magical, okay? Press coverage. Press is hugely important. And in the 10 years of doing CRAVE, we have never once spent a dime on paid media coverage. Every single article that you have seen on us were earned media, okay? And this is really important because it builds up credibility and gives legitimacy and validation to what you're doing as a company. And the best way, and some of you may ask this question, I'll take questions on all of these things later, but one of the ways of getting press, getting a PR company is really great, but I can tell you for a fact, there are a lot more shitty PR companies than there are good ones, okay? And the best way for you to get press coverage is to do something that's actually fucking cool. Create something, design something that's actually worthy of writers to write about. Like that is really the key ingredient here. So yeah, press coverage is huge. And also social media. I think social media is going through a reckoning. We are no longer just enamored with influencers with their like perfect lifestyle and like, I just woke up like this, that kind of stuff. We want real shit. We want like real content. And so how you show up on social media as a brand or as yourself, as a person selling your product or pushing your idea, being authentic, saying your mind, speaking your opinions really, really matter because people can really quickly filter out the bullshit from the real stuff. So, I know authentic is a word that really gets overused these days, but I cannot emphasize how important it is to show up authentically. And then also speaking up. I think speaking up is a huge part of activism. All of you, I don't think a single person that I saw raised your hand when I asked if you think the world is perfect. The world is great. We all know we have a lot of work to do. And which means that the way things have been done is no longer acceptable. And if you want to create change, you need to stand up to the status quo. And that means speaking up. That means using your voice. That means writing articles, sharing your thoughts, creating graphics, calling out, calling in. And I encourage you to look into what both of those things mean because those are really helpful in our era of social media, how you engage with people, engage with brands with differing ideas, okay? So speaking up is one of those core parts of being an activist that it's uncomfortable, but eventually it'll get easier. But you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then the last component of engagement is community. If you want to create change, there is power in public numbers. Publicly supporting your friends, publicly speaking out and having people support it, and then also creating a community that also believe in the same things and showing up for you, showing up for other people, other communities, all of that really, really count. So yeah, engagement is huge. So that is sort of the playbook. But no matter what it is that you do, whether you're a designer, you're a writer, you're graphic artist, you want to make pieces that are just installations for galleries, it's all good. Like no matter what your occupation is, the most important thing is that you are a human being first. And your job is to make the world a better place. Like if you don't know what that is, I'm going to tell you, your job is to make the world a better place, period. Okay? Like you cannot leave the world worse than you left it. Okay? Because the world is changing and the way that we have been doing things are no longer acceptable. We are moving towards a more just and more equitable world. And if we want to get there, We have to do uncomfortable things. We have to act more ethically as designers. And we have to act as if, what we do makes a difference, because no matter if you're designing a vibrator or a hairbrush, what you do makes a difference. So act like it. And this is a quote that have stayed with me for at least 15 years since I discovered it. Okay, so that's the end. And if you want to check out a few books that I think could help you on that road, if you're interested in, acting more ethically as a designer and how to speak up, speak out, Ruined by Design is amazing. It's especially for graphic designers, and also industrial, just designers in general. And then also, if you want to better understand the gender gap when it comes to women's issues, and how it affects products, and just how overall, women suffer because of it. Caroline Criado Perez's book, Invisible Women. How many of you have heard of it? Some of you, maybe, none of you. Oh my God, I honestly believe it is a required reading in every industrial design class. There is a huge gap of needs for women in products that are just completely overlooked. And she actually puts the data to that. For example, like heart attacks. I don't know if you know this, but heart attacks in women show up differently than in men. However, the way the medical profession is trained, they, the whole heart palpitation or like the breathing, all of that, those are most typical in men. And that's atypical, which is ridiculous because women don't experience heart attacks that way. However, their symptoms are considered atypical, and therefore a lot of women are turned away from ERs and misdiagnosed, and women die. So these are some of just the examples that she gives you concrete numbers to, that you can kind of wrap your head around of this bias and microaggressions, that fail, that products that don't consider women and the impacts of that. So that's a great book. And then also I think part of this whole activism is also to create communities and have allies, especially when it comes to this whole gender disparity that we're seeing in our profession. Allyship is hugely important, particularly men. You all have such an important voice in helping to uplift women. And this is a very short brochure that I co-wrote with another designer called Caterina Rizzoni, called How to Be Better Ally to Women in Industrial Design. It tells you some do's and don'ts, and just also it's a collective knowledge from the design community that, can help to open up that conversation. And you can also just send to your HR, if you happen to find yourself working in a consultancy full of dudes. It's like, hey, something's wrong. So, okay, that's the end of my presentation. I'll be taking questions.
Woohoo!
All right. Thank you so much, T, for your presentation for us. Everything you shared about design activism and engagement, I feel like is super valuable and relevant to all of us. Especially like your comment about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's really what keeps so many of us from speaking up. So now we'll begin the Q&A portion of the talk. If you would like to answer or to ask your question personally, please just use the raise your hand feature, which you can find in the bottom under reactions. Otherwise, the chat is open again, so you can just type out your question in there and we will raise it for you. I see that Mari already has her hand raised, but I have a question that we're gonna start off with.
Do I stop sharing screen? What do I do? Like, can you guys still see me?
Yeah, please, if you could stop sharing your screen, okay. We could all just look at each other, make it feel a little more conversational.
Got it. Why do I always feel like a dinosaur when I do this stuff?
I feel you.
There you go. All right, cool. Did I stop sharing screen?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay.
All right. So my question for you, T, is I've been really inspired by all your work around industrial design activism, especially I've been following your Instagram and I see all the posts that you share on there. And you recently made a post about wishing you could go back in time to tell yourself to take up space And I think that that's a really important message that maybe we all should hear, especially the women present. And I know you kind of touched on it, but maybe you could speak a little more to that.
Yeah, I think growing up, being Asian immigrant, and also just in a very patriarchal society, I think I, like many women, were kind of indoctrinated with the idea that we should be seen and not heard, and that, you know, we were appreciated when it served, you know, from the male gaze, but we shouldn't, you know, be too loud. We shouldn't stand up. It's like there's this feeling that we should not take up as much space as men, which is so interesting because they just, I'm making obviously sweeping generalization, but it's like men, they, you know, it's just like, they just exist. You know, they have no qualms about interrupting you in a meeting. They have no qualms of asserting their opinions as facts. Whereas for a woman, it's like, you know, because I'm so active on social media, I have seen many instances of like just that behavior where it's like what they say, they just have this, they're just like, I should say what I think, which is such a luxury, I think, because as women, we don't show up in the world that way. We're like, oh, you know, will I get killed? Are they going to yell at me? Like, you know, like, should I, you know, there's just such a different way of taking up space. And I wish I had told myself, you know, as a young designer, to speak up more. I wish I did. I wish that I felt my experiences were valuable enough to say something about. I didn't feel like my experience was worthy of of just bringing it up. You know, I was uncomfortable with this. I didn't want to go to the bars. I didn't want to go to a strip club, you know, with the rest of my team, you know, but I was like, oh, I'm cool. Yeah, I should just roll with it. You know, it's cool. I want to be one of the boys. And that's one of those things is like, no, that's not okay. If you're uncomfortable with something, you have every right as any mediocre man that's going to complain, you know, about any asinine thing. Like your opinion and your feelings is just as valid as his. And I think that was something that I didn't feel comfortable in owning. And yeah, now I won't shut up.
Mari, please feel free to ask your question now.
Hi T. I have a comment and a question. First off, I just want to say thank you so much for your work. You know, so many vibrators are perversely infantilizing given their candy-like colors and since they often have cute little animals on them. So I really appreciate you bringing serious and mature design to sex toys. Plus, they're just really well made. And sort of going off of what you were saying before, you know, as a woman of color, and especially as an Asian American woman who may be more likely to be stereotyped as meek and passive, how do you deal with people who do not listen to you or dismiss you and your work because of your intersecting identities, even when, you know, you're already used to speaking out about these things, but you're still getting shut down?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough question, because it's interesting. I grew up in the South. So like I said, you know, I grew up in Georgia. Okay. It's not exactly the most progressive of cities. Like, you know, I love the West Coast. I'm very much a California girl. But here, you know, there are a lot of Asians here. And in Georgia, there weren't really, I was like the only Asian person in my, I think, elementary school. Like when I first like went in, I was like one of three maybe Asian kids in the school. And I think because of that, there was a lot of racism, and I basically learned to kind of ignore it. Like I have been told so many, you know, absurd things like someone has once asked me, are Chinese women's vaginas, slanted, like, or, kids are the worst sometimes, because if you're a kid, making chinky eyes and like saying things. And I think those things I've learned to kind of internalize and just like, okay, I'm above that and I'm just going to move on. And because also at that time, that's not okay to speak up. That wasn't okay. Like, this is the first time in my life I feel like I could talk about these things, because we have evolved culturally to a point where we're not going to fucking take this anymore. And you have to speak up. So I'm sorry, I forgot your question. What was the question?
Okay. How do you deal with people who won't listen to you or dismiss you and your work, even when you're speaking out?
Okay. Well, there are different layers to that. So if I'm speaking out on my own Instagram and people don't want to listen to me, well, I probably don't know, because they probably won't like me, won't engage, or things like that, or people who will just intentionally troll you. Okay. And that's kind of, it's almost like we need it's just part of the etiquette of how people talk to each other these days. And so for me, I've just had to like grow a thick skin in knowing like, okay, this person just wants to troll me. Like, okay, it's called block and delete. Okay, bye. And then there are some people where you do engage with because they're really trying to understand. They may have come from a different point of view. But if there's a desire and you can see that, then you engage with that. And so basically you just have to not care. Does that make sense? I mean, really what it comes down to it is that I just have to not care if people don't listen to me. But I have to speak my piece, because my life is not going to be better if I stay quiet. Sorry, I got emotional just because I think so many people don't speak up because they're scared. But when you don't, there's no shot in hell that your life can be better. And it starts with having a difficult conversation with your superiors, with whoever have acted, intentionally or unintentionally against you. And so, you just have to speak your mind, whether or not they listen or not. And you hope they care, but you really don't know. So, wow, that was embarrassing. I've never cried during a talk. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you so much. And, please don't feel embarrassed. We really appreciate you sharing and speaking from the heart like this. And I think I can speak for everyone when I say, it means a lot to hear you say these things. But let's take a question from the chat. This question's coming from Puya. He asks, we are at a point where human-centered design is proved to be harmful to other life forms, creating many forms of ecological and environmental disasters. How can designers move beyond product-centered design and engage forms of design activism that challenge the structures or conditions under which various forms of oppression are created or enforced?
Whoa. I don't think I'm that smart. Can you just say that again? It's a really long question.
Right. Okay. So we're at a point where human-centered design is proved to be harmful to other life forms.
Got that.
Okay. You mentioned that briefly too when you were talking about the really terrible sex toys that are designed with no regard for the kind of chemicals that are in them either. So creating many forms of ecological and environmental disasters. How can designers move beyond product-centered design and engage forms of design activism that challenge the structures or conditions under which various forms of oppression are created?
Yeah, no, I think, okay, I got it now. Wow. So that book I was telling you about, Ruined by Design, that is a great start, okay? Because in order to challenge those things, first you need to know what to challenge. That means you need to have some sense of ethics in you. You need to know when something is right or wrong, like in your mind. Like for example, like he's a UX designer. He was a UX designer, and Mike. He's someone actually I know and is a friend. And but he says that like the book that he wrote is because it's almost like atonement for all the things that he's designed that he knew was wrong. But when you're a young designer, you do not know right from wrong. You're just told like, okay, I want you to design this, but you're like, wait, I really want. It's like, you know, you are like on the web and you're designing like a cancellation thing, and your company tells, you know, your boss tells you, no, you want to make that really, really small, like so they can't find it, you know, or like intentionally bury it. You know, that's unethical. You know, that's unethical. And one of the things that he argues is that designers don't think like designers. Think of yourself as gatekeepers. If something is not going to treat the environment well, or if something is not going to treat people well, is not going to add to their life, that is deceiving them, whatever, then you have a responsibility, because you are paid to do your job, to be a designer, which is to make the world better and to help people. Okay, let me just remind you. And if anything goes against that, you need to know when to put your tools down. This is from Mike. So this is the book you really ought to read, is that he emphasizes that if we think ourselves as gatekeepers, then we are then better able to stand up when we find ourselves in situations where we are designing against humanity. You know, some of the things are unethical, you know, that will just, because we can't continue designing the way we have been, the way that we have really like ruined the earth. And so if you think of yourselves as gatekeepers, you can then better make sure those types of bad things don't get past you. And part of your toolkit, in addition to saying no, is also to engage in a dialogue with your employer why this is not okay. Okay. And or sometimes it's just a fucking quit. Like, I don't understand how anyone can work at Facebook. Well, I can understand why, because they make so much money. But I just mean, like, it is so bad, right? Okay, we like nearly lost our democracy. And there comes a time when you have to know that you are more than just a designer. You are a gatekeeper. You're protecting people too, and the environment. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I think you should look up Mike's book, Ruined by Design. He says it much better than I can.
Thank you. And I actually have another question from the chat here. And, you know, kind of turning it back to, you know, you mentioned that you are from Georgia. Coming from Georgia, do you have, this is a heavy question, but do you have any responses to the shootings in Atlanta, especially in regard to your mission with the role of women in the sex industry?
Well, okay. Well, for one, like, I don't really consider myself in the sex industry. Yes, the products that I design are, you know, pleasure products, but like, I don't have like performers or, you know, people that's coming in and out of my office. Like it is a very like, you know, that industry is very different. So that's the whole production industry things. If you came in my studio and you look around, you could not tell if I'm designing like printers or like baby products. You know, it's just like it's very, if you come in our factory, it's also the same way. It's just we see ourselves as a consumer product company. So yeah, that's one. I think with regards to just what recently happened, I think that's probably why I'm so emotional. Yeah, is that it's really infuriating to see the deputy explain his actions in a way as if he connects with him, like he identifies with him so much more. Like he's saying, oh yeah, well, you know, he was at the end of his rope. He just had a bad day. That's atrocious.
Mhm.
And you see clearly the systemic racism that is caused by this white supremacy that has dominated our society for so long, beginning with Great Britain, you know, how they've colonized in this mentality, and that needs to change. And Asians have been touted as like the model minority because we're so well behaved and we don't say anything, and that really needs to change. And we need to go against the grain of what we're told, of not using our voice, not, you know, just blend in, don't stand out. You know, I've been told that my whole life, but that's not going to work of where we are today. So yeah, it's really, really infuriating. And I really hope that people get riled up emotionally, because here's a secret. When you're an activist, emotions are your currency. That emotion can galvanize people. It can inspire people to take action and do things that they normally would not do. Okay. And that emotion is what make people realize that they're human beings and that there are other human beings just like them. You know, I mean, unless you're a psychotic, cold-blooded killer and like you just don't have that in you, and then like that's a whole different thing, you know. But most people, emotions can be really good. And I think we have, from a design point of view and culturally, we have kind of pushed emotion and aesthetics and like things that are like soft, like aside, because we really don't know how to talk about it. But I think that's why there's so much reaction in now. So yeah, I hope that this makes a lot of people angry and take action and continue to hold themselves and others accountable.
And I did want to clarify on behalf of the person asking the question that it was more so that we saw you as running counter to the sex industry. Just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a criticism or anything. It actually was the opposite.
No, it's fine. I design sex toys, like, yeah, I don't care. No, I give, no, it's just fine. It's fine. Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions? You guys have been awesome. I see so many like people. Hi. Hello, everybody.
We do have another question from the chat. I'll read it for you. Thank you so much for your work and this incredible conversation. I'm wondering if you can expand on the difference between calling in and calling out. When is it best to call in versus calling out?
I think it depends on the intended outcome. Calling out is like identifying someone, like, you caused me harm. Okay. Calling in is like, hey, can you explain the intention of that? Like, if you see a post that doesn't like, that is like, it just seems so off, you know, and you're like, this company cannot be serious, you know? And yeah, some people just jump on it and just like have the social media mob at them. But then you can also engage them in a way that's like, can you better help me understand, what did you think you were doing by putting up a yellow square? You know, like, kind of, you know, like it's a different kind of dialogue, if that kind of makes sense. I mean, there are better like leaflets out there, but I think like quickly, that's how I would explain it. Yeah.
T, I have one question for you. I was wondering how you stay kind of refreshed and recharged for design and activism, how you kind of keep your ideas going, especially when things can be kind of draining at times.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you know, emotions like is part of your is a currency, you know, if you're doing activism. And I'm actually an introvert. and I need a lot of time to recharge. So when I have like talks and things and like anything that's external, when I have to be like on, like, hey, then I have to make sure to allocate enough like downtime for me. And this is something I'm learning along the way. And I work with my PR and I work with like, you know, myself to like, okay, please do not book me anything, you know, like for the rest of the month. I just can't. But it's really about honoring like your own needs, you know, inside, so that you can then channel that and put out what you really want to put out. And I'm still trying to take my own advice and sorting through it. You know, I definitely journal. I can't even talk anymore. Oh my God. Journaling is a big part of it. I'll tell you another one. Philosophy. I've been reading a lot of philosophy a lot lately. And now I'm not trying to pretend to be like cerebral or anything. Like, no, I'm not reading like Greek and like, you know, Latin and shit like that. Nietzsche. There is a series I highly recommend. It's called The School of Life. Has anyone heard of it? Yeah, The School of Life. Just phenomenal, because I think a lot of the problems, like some of the emotional imbalance and like the frustration, you know, like finding motivation and like all these things, they're not new to humankind. Like we've been thinking about this for thousands and thousands of years. And when I look at philosophy and those, I take solace in that. It helps to reshift and help me realize like, I really don't matter. Like we're all going to go to dust, you know, but it just gives you in a way that allows you to kind of unburden yourself from some of that and kind of put things in perspective. So I personally, I really love the School of Life for this, because they speak on so many different topics. And that has helped me a lot. And that's one thing that I didn't read a lot. I mean, obviously I had to read, but like I was always so busy that I never really found time to read. And the pandemic really made me, read more. I can't even talk anymore. Yeah.
No, this is great. This is great. I have another question from the chat for you. Oh gosh, where'd it go? Daniel wanted to ask, could you talk more about why demystifying sex is important for creating a more equitable society? And why do you think women and female bodies are criticized the hardest for expressing their sexuality?
Okay, can you say the first part again? Again.
Can you talk about why demystifying sex is important for creating a more equitable society?
Okay. So for that, if you are not told the full truth about your own body, that is the beginning of oppression. So that is why it is inhumane. It is criminal that like so much about the female body has been a mystery to so many. It just to the medical, you know, like the clitoris wasn't even added until like a date way later. And then if you look up things on the penis and the testes, you have so much literature around that, you know? And so the inequity of what's available from male body versus female, like is just, it's not okay. So that is why it is important to know your body, to know all of that, is to have agency and ownership over yourself. So yeah. Okay. And the second part of the question.
Why do you think women and female bodies are criticized the hardest for expressing their sexuality?
A huge part of it, I blame religion. There are a lot of outdated religious beliefs that seep into our society that we're still trying to recover from. And yeah, I mean, it's this, you know, misogynistic, you know, view and the superiority of men. yeah, I may cause a lot of shitstorm for that, but I do think there are very much, a lot of archaic religious teachings that distort the reality, for people. So, women, women were burned as witches, like, it's funny, but not funny, and the practice of demonizing women and our desire to have pleasure that our body's capable of is inhumane. So, and a lot of it came from, religious teachings, that I'm not saying religion is bad. Okay. I think religion serves a lot of purpose in building communities and more, all these different things. But there are other aspects of it that's just redonkulous.
I appreciate that. As someone who grew up Catholic, you and I could have a long conversation offline about that effect on the body. But I do want to say we are coming close to the end of our time. And I know that we've got one more question. I wanted one of our fellow seminar series cohort members, Amina, to ask you. And we'll take it out on this question. Amina?
This might be quite open-ended, but again, like everyone has said, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I really appreciate the story and kind of the narrative that you've given us. But to kind of end things, and this is very broad, so if this might kind of extend to a lot of things that you have talked about, but if there's a particular moment in time that you can kind of pinpoint a specific group project that you've had to reject, simply because values didn't align or because there were things that you just did not agree with. If there's a particular one that you want to talk about, I know that you don't have to disclose a lot, but just kind of going over that.
Well, that's actually a really good question. So what's so interesting, because I did this workshop with some designers that are like, they're a really big deal. They were absorbed by Google and anyway, they're really respected industrial designers. And one of the exercises that when I was at this conference, they had us do was that put on a bingo square, doodle all the different things that you've designed. Okay. So that was the first exercise. And then you're supposed to look at the different squares and then mark out products that you were not proud of. Okay. And then you're supposed to then find the ones that are you are most proud of. Okay. And so that's supposed to guide you and think. What's so interesting is that in my life, the products that I put down of all the things that I've designed, because I only marked out maybe one thing, maybe, and all of the products that I worked on, because otherwise I could not work on them. If I did not believe in this product, I could not work on them. It would hurt me. It would hurt my soul. I just, maybe it's a very privileged point of view. I mean, my parents, we don't have a lot of money, but it's I just would rather do something else than to design something that I know it's just another widget, or it's meaningless, or it doesn't help people. And it's just another product so that the sales department can have as a new SKU to present to, I don't know, Walmart or Target, just because they wanted a different hairbrush or something like that, So found myself, I realized from that exercise that I'm very mission driven. And so I can say, fortunately, I haven't really worked on products that I don't care about. I just haven't. When I was hired at Trek, I was designing products for women, accessories like saddles and things like that. All of that was very necessary. And so, that was all great. But no one I never had to accept a job that was hey, make a newer version of a Keurig, which we all know is so bad. If you actually look online, the Keurig designer is I kind of regret it. I mean, of course, he's got plenty of money and he's just regretting it from the comfort of his mansion, probably. But I've never had to be like, no, I don't think I can design like, you know, another version of a Keurig, you know? So yeah, I've always tried to find projects that I really, really believed in. And so I've been lucky, you know, in that I've been able to do so.
All right,
Oh my
that
God.
brings us to our time.
I
So
time. Thank you all. You guys are so nice. I cannot believe I cried. Oh, oh, I feel like we're so close. Like like you know me. You see me. Like
Oh,
it's kind of amazing. So yeah. So thank you all so much. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us.
You gave us such a fun and entertaining presentation today, and we really appreciate the level of engagement. So, and also all of us have cried on Zoom this year, so you are not alone. Also, I want to remind everybody that the seminar series does continue. The typographic designer Peter Balak will be joining us for a lunch hour on April 15th. So look for an email with the information for that event. And thank everyone for participating. This series is off to a really great start, thanks to T, and I really can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah, and I just put my Instagram handle, and like, you know, feel free to stay in touch with me because you see me cry, so we're friends forever.
Yay!
Yeah, so okay.
Thank you so much, T.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Good night. Bye.
Thank you and good night.